Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations. Many of us had predicted that the Fraternal Society of St. Peter, the FSSP, would face the wrath of modernist Rome sooner or later, and it appears that Rome has quietly issued an ultimatum to the FSSP. And the really remarkable thing about it is this: it's barely being noticed outside of a few traditional Catholic outlets. So while Francis has famously issued his protection notice for the FSSP, which states that they will not be subject to Traditionis Custodes, he recently clarified it, and he included an important caveat that will make the situation intolerable for many younger priests of the FSSP, who are in very many things indistinguishable from their brother priests in the SSPX on the question of the new Mass. So let's get a closer look at the story, because it's giving us an idea of what the next phase of Rome's war on tradition will look like. This story came and went with little fanfare, which is in and of itself rather remarkable. But there is some fatigue among Catholic commentators among the attempts to do away with the Apostolic Mass, apparently, although I haven't suffered from it. But here's the story. Headline from LifeSite. Pope insists traditionalist FSSP priests must concelebrate new rite Chrism Mass, according to a French archbishop. Look, I hate to say this. Many of us predicted this back when the FSSP were given their handwritten protection of the TLM back in February. There's always a catch, and this is one heck of a catch, which I'll go over in a moment. From the article, quote, a French archbishop reported that Pope Francis wants priests devoted to the traditional Latin Mass to concelebrate the new rite at least once a year. According to an article published in French magazine Famille Chrétienne last Thursday, Pope Francis received the leadership of the French Bishops' Conference in Rome just a few weeks after their spring plenary assembled in Lourdes. On this occasion, the topic of the controversial motu proprio Traditionis Custodes, with which the pontiff imposed severe restrictions on the celebration of the traditional Latin Mass, the TLM, was brought to the table so that Pope Francis could clarify certain points. According to the bishops at the meeting, the Pope began by recalling emphatically that the decree of February 11th, according to which priests of the priestly fraternity of St. Peter are not affected by the restrictions of the motu proprio and may continue to celebrate Mass according to the Roman Missal of 1962, came from him. Immediately afterward, however, Pope Francis emphasized the second paragraph of this decree, which states that FSSP priests, quote, may use this faculty in their own churches or oratories only, and that otherwise the 1962 Missal, quote, may only be used with the consent of the ordinary of the place, except for the celebration of private masses. According to Monsignor de Molins-Beaufort, the Archbishop of Reims and head of the French Bishops' Conference, Francis also insisted that all priests, regardless of their affiliation, must concelebrate at the annual Chrism Mass. It was very insistent that priests concelebrate at least the Chrism Mass, de Molins-Beaufort said. End quote. And that, my friends, is in violation of the Code of Canon Law number 902, which states that all priests retain their right to offer the Eucharist and Mass individually and cannot be coerced into celebrating Mass in a group. In case you're not aware, the Chrism Mass is offered by the bishop of the diocese during Holy Week every year. It's where the oil of anointing is blessed and given to the priests of the diocese, and it's for their use at the Easter Mass and other occasions. And while it's not typically mandatory that every priest attend and concelebrate the Mass, not attending can have negative effects on one's career. It's often cited as a sign of unity in a diocese that the bishop and all his priests get together annually to offer one Mass in unison, despite the concept of concelebrated Masses being rejected by the Church formally prior to Vatican II, as I went over in my video this past week on Saturday when I read from Pius XII's address on the matter. But why is this a big catch for keeping the TLM? And it's rather simple. Many FSSP priests and other groups have stated openly that they would refuse to ever offer the new Mass. Full stop. When they talk about it, they often sound like SSPX priests. I know this because I've heard a few young FSSP priests say this in person to me, that they would refuse to offer the new Mass, even if it meant losing their faculties. They feel as strongly about this as their brother priests in the SSPX do. It's simply a fact, regardless of how you or I may personally feel on the matter. Now, is that short-sighted in these days of the traditional faith being quietly suppressed? That's up to you to decide. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. But this catch was something many of us predicted, and now we have confirmation of it, as well as confirmation that the bishop ultimately gets to decide whether the FSSP can continue with their mission in a given diocese or not. Now, as I stated a moment ago, Canon 902 prevents what Francis said from happening. LifeSite again provides the canon law quote from their article, quote, Canon 902 states that every priest always retains the right to exercise his freedom to celebrate the Eucharist individually. Quote, unless the benefit of Christ's faithful requires or suggests otherwise, priests may con-celebrate the Eucharist. They are, however, fully entitled to celebrate the Eucharist individually, but not while a celebration is taking place in the same church oratory, it states. The Pope's alleged insistence on con-celebration at the Chrism Mass during his meeting with the French bishops appears to validate the actions of the now emeritus Archbishop Roland Minerath of Dijon, who unceremoniously evicted the FSSP from his diocese last year, arguing that some of its priests refused to con-celebrate at the Chrism Mass. End quote. None of that is surprising, to be honest. Neither the validation of actions taken against the FSSP in France is surprising, nor is this hammering of the FSSP that most will think isn't really a big deal, unless you know the dynamics of the FSSP and the kind of priest they're producing these days. And I guarantee you that Rome is aware that FSSP seminaries are producing rigid young priests, not too different than those SSPX priests on everyday liturgical issues. They're very similar in that regard. Now, what this means for the FSSP moving forward is anyone's guess, though. Of course, the future and what might happen in the future is really anyone's guess, and it's actually not that important here. What's more important here is the past. In 1988, the FSSP were founded from a group of priests who broke away from the SSPX due to Archbishop Lefebvre's consecration of bishops. They were given an agreement by Rome that has frankly not been adhered to by Rome at all, and one of the consequences of that agreement was something called Protocol 1411/99. Now, protocols from Rome, from the office that issued them, will have an assignment number followed by a slash, and then it'll have the last two digits of the year they were issued. So in this case, 1411/99, issued in 1999. The roots of that protocol, issued by the Congregation for Divine Worship in the late 1990s, was allegedly the heads of the FSSP were forbidding priests from saying the Novus Ordo, the new Mass invented by Annibale Bugnini and Paul VI. Thus, the Congregation for Divine Worship issued this protocol. Here's a brief analysis of the issue from Tom Woods, writing back in 1999 when this all happened. You're going to hear a different take from him than what I'll have after that for you. Quote, as a result of a series of questions, a dubium in church law lingo, presented to the Congregation of Divine Worship at the initiative of the liberal element within the fraternity, that congregation, after consulting with the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, and the Pontifical Council for the Interpretation of Legislative Texts, issued a fateful protocol in early July. Simply put, in Protocol 1411/99, the Vatican has ordered that any priest, even one belonging to an institute enjoying the privilege of using the 1962 Roman Missal, may freely celebrate or con-celebrate Mass using the revised Missal of 1970 with no impediment whatever, the will of their superiors notwithstanding. But the Vatican went further, mandating that FSSP priests must say the new Mass or con-celebrate under some conditions. Thus, in one brief statement, the Vatican repudiated the agreement it had reached with the fraternity in 1988, and fraternity liberals, in orchestrating this, relinquished a privileged exclusive use of the liturgical books of 1962, for which a few thousand priests around the world continue to yearn. End quote. So Rome broke its agreement with the FSSP at the time, which apparently said that their priests would never be required to say the new Mass. Some interpretations of Protocol 1411 and the ensuing Vatican actions say that they were never going to be forced to say the new Mass, while others do not agree with that assessment. Let's go to what a priest from the FSSP had to say about the matter in the late 1990s. From the official statement of Father Arnaud J. de Villers, FSSP, we get this, quote, what does it, Protocol 1411/99, say? It says that any priest who has the privilege of using the 1962 typical edition of the Roman Missal, so-called Tridentine Latin Mass, under the indult and the provisions of the motu proprio Ecclesia Dei et Flicta, also retains the right of celebrating Mass according to the current normative Roman Missal, Novus Ordo, and thus cannot be forbidden by his superior from either celebrating or con-celebrating according to the rites of this Missal. It is important to specify that it does not force any priest to celebrate or concelebrate according to the 1969 Roman Missal, but simply gives him the freedom of doing so. It is important also to notice that canon law says that no priest can be forced to concelebrate. See Canon 902. End quote. Of course, that doesn't make any mention of post-1411 Vatican action that did say they'd have to concelebrate, as Tom Woods asserts. And that protocol says they can say it if they want to, the new Mass. It's pretty straightforward, I guess. But now in 2022, Francis is telling the French bishops that the FSSP must concelebrate the Chrism Mass with the bishop if directed to do so. And that is a violation of the agreement reached with the FSSP back in 1988, not to mention a violation of the Code of Canon Law. Not that the Code of Canon Law means much of anything these days. Rome breaching such agreements isn't exactly a new thing. According to Anne Roche Muggeridge, back in 1988, the FSSP were promised a bishop to guide them in much the same way Opus Dei are governed. This goes back to the failed negotiations between Lefebvre and Rome when the SSPX were on the verge of getting a single bishop from Rome, when suddenly Cardinal Ratzinger made it sound like the SSPX would have to say the new Mass along with the Apostolic Mass, as well as accept other Vatican II novelties. Muggeridge claims that the FSSP were also offered a bishop during their negotiations. There are indications that this happened, but that it was quickly forgotten, so really Rome breaking faith with traditional priestly fraternities is nothing new. Francis is appearing to ignore the Code of Canon Law on the issue of the FSSP and other priests being forced to concelebrate the new Mass, which isn't really that remarkable either. Many of us predicted that this would be the point of attack of modernist Rome, making saying the new Mass or not a point of schism or obedience. Many of these priests will submit despite many of them saying that they will never offer the new Mass at all. Which begs a question. Did you attend the Chrism Mass in your diocese? Look, I haven't gone to a Novus Ordo Mass in a few years now, so I didn't go to one during Holy Week. If you went and are familiar with your traditional priests at your local FSSP or Institute of Christ the King parish or similar groups, let me know in the comments section if they were present for the Chrism Mass, and if they concelebrated the Mass or if they merely sat in the pews, which often is the case when they do attend. I'm honestly interested because I've heard no reports in my own dioceses about this, and I try not to complicate my FSSP priest life by unnecessarily bringing up my work with them. That would just cause them problems, so I don't bring it up with them. But more broadly, let me know in the comments what you think about the story. Am I right in thinking that modernist Rome is using the question of obedience and the Chrism Mass to put the thumb screws to the FSSP? Look, I don't want them suppressed or harmed or undermined in any way. The more traditional priests out there, the better. That is my unequivocal stand. Just let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments, please, and like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.